We knew a lot of money was being generated by Grand Funk Railroad, but by our bank account, we were seeing very little of it. These words from Mark Farner expose the shocking reality behind one of America's most popular rock bands of the 1970s. While they were selling out stadiums faster than the Beatles, their manager Terry Knight was taking nearly 3 times what they earned. What would you do if the person managing your career was secretly pocketing most of your money? When Grand Funk Railroad discovered this betrayal and fired their manager, Knight unleashed a devastating $57 million lawsuit and sent sheriff deputies to seize their equipment before a sold-out Madison Square Garden show. This is the story of how 3 musicians fought one of the most powerful men in the music industry and somehow created their biggest hits in the process. The band had arrived at Madison Square Garden for a benefit concert in December 1972. Backstage, as they prepared to perform for thousands, the door swung open. Their former manager, Terry Knight, walked in with sheriff deputies carrying court papers. Knight pointed at the band's instruments and equipment. "Those are mine," he announced as deputies produced a court order authorizing seizure of everything. With the show scheduled to start in less than an hour, Mike Farner erupted in frustration, jumping up and down as deputies began inventorying his guitars. With panic setting in, the band faced an impossible choice: cancel the show and risk a riot, or perform knowing everything would be taken afterward. They negotiated a desperate compromise. Deputies would let them use their equipment for this performance only, with everything to be confiscated immediately after the final song. Knight positioned himself in the wings, watching the band perform with what he intended to be their equipment for the last time. True to his word, Knight had deputies move in the moment the final notes faded. Band members watched helplessly as their equipment disappeared into trucks waiting in the New York night. This calculated power play at one of the world's most prestigious venues maximized both practical disruption and public humiliation. But Knight's revenge was just beginning. By the end of 1972, Knight had filed over 30 separate legal actions against the band, their company, and individual members. The total demand reached $57 million, equivalent to over $390 million today. For perspective, Knight wanted more money from these 3 musicians from Flint, Michigan, than the entire annual budget of countries like Iceland or Jamaica in 1972. Knight's strategy was comprehensive. He claimed breach of contract, fraud, copyright infringement, and trademark violations. He didn't just target their money. He claimed ownership of their name, asserting they couldn't perform as Grand Funk Railroad without his permission. He claimed rights to their music catalog, threatening their ability to perform their own songs. He even went after their personal assets, forcing them to worry about losing their homes. Court orders soon began freezing the band's income streams. Don Brewer later revealed that despite selling millions of records and packing stadiums, they survived on a couple $100 in weekly stipends during this period. The timing couldn't have been worse. Knight launched a legal assault when the band was at their commercial peak. Their album Phoenix had just gone gold. They were headlining major venues and their fan base was growing rapidly. If Knight won his claims to their name, music, and future earnings, Grand Funk Railroad would effectively cease to exist. The moment Grand Funk discovered the true nature of their contracts felt like a punch to the gut. Don Brewer described opening their financial statements as like finding out your best friend had been stealing from you for years. While fans lined up around the block for tickets, their bank accounts remained nearly empty. Knight's control stemmed from his clever business structure. Instead of connecting the band directly with Capitol Records, Knight created his own production company as a middleman. This meant every dollar from record sales passed through his hands first. The numbers told a devastating story. Knight took 16% of all album profits. The 3 musicians combined received just 6% or 2% each. For a $1 million album, Knight pocketed $160,000, while each musician earned only $20,000. Knight's grip tightened further through GFR Enterprises, the company handling all band business. Knight gave himself 21% ownership of this entity, meaning he owned a fifth of the band's business structure itself. This dual position, as both manager taking commission and part-time owner of the business, created a massive conflict of interest. Mark Farner later admitted, We were so excited to be making records that we'd have signed anything. When someone hands you a pen and says, "Sign here to make your dreams come true," you don't think about percentages. The breaking point came during a financial meeting in early 1972. When confronted about the disparity between the band's success and their personal finances, Knight reportedly brushed off their concerns. "That's the business," he told them. "You make music, I handle money." This dismissive response led to their fateful decision to fire him in March 1972. While Knight was busy pulling legal levers, Grand Funk Railroad was quietly planning their comeback. The same band that couldn't afford to replace their seized equipment somehow managed to create "We're an American Band," the anthem that would become their biggest hit. With their backs against the wall in early 1973, they made strategic moves. They turned to former roadie Andy Cavalier to help manage their affairs and signed directly with Capitol Records, bypassing Knight's production company. This new arrangement gave them something they'd never had before: direct control over their finances and creative direction. In April 1973, they brought in producer Todd Rundgren, already known for his work with Badfinger. "We walked into that studio broken. We walked out with our future in our hands," Mark Farner later described. The title track "We're an American Band," written by drummer Brewer during their darkest days, represented this evolution. "I wrote it in a hotel room after a court appearance," Brewer revealed. The lyrics were about freedom when we felt anything but free. By September 1973, the song reached #1 in the charts, their first chart-topping single. The album reached #2 on Billboard charts, providing much-needed financial relief while legal bills mounted. Their cover of The Locomotion followed, reaching #1 in May 1974. This artistic rebirth happened while fighting multiple lawsuits. They often traveled directly from court to recording sessions or concerts, carrying the weight of their legal burdens while creating their most successful music. After 2 years and 30 lawsuits, Grand Funk Railroad faced an impossible choice. By early 1974, the legal war had drained them financially and emotionally. Despite their musical success, they faced stark options: continue fighting until bankruptcy or settle and surrender valuable assets. The final negotiations unfolded during a 13-hour marathon in a Manhattan law office in summer 1974. "We were running out of money and running out of time," Brewer later explained. "The band wouldn't have survived if a court fight lasted longer. We had to decide what mattered most: keeping our name and moving forward, or fighting to the bitter end." The settlement they signed was bittersweet. Grand Funk would keep their band name, their most valuable touring asset. However, Knight secured the copyrights and publishing royalties for all Grand Funk recordings from 1969 to 1972, including fan favorites like "I'm Your Captain" and "Closer to Home." Knight later boasted to Rolling Stone, "I get 50% of what they get on what they call the bad old Terry Knight Days records." For the band, this meant that every time those early songs played on the radio, appeared in films, or sold on compilation albums, Knight would continue collecting money, while the musicians who created those songs received less. For Grand Funk Railroad, the settlement meant surrendering millions in potential earnings, but gaining their future. Within months, they released their next album and toured successfully without Knight's interference. Grand Funk Railroad's battle with Terry Knight became a turning point for the music industry. Their experience fundamentally shifted the power balance between managers and musicians, inspiring others to examine their agreements carefully. Perhaps most remarkable is that this period of intense pressure produced Grand Funk's most enduring work. "We're an American Band" and "The Locomotion" emerged directly from this crisis, transforming their legal struggle into anthems that still resonate with fans today. While Knight retained rights to their early catalog, he couldn't stop them from creating new classics that would define their legacy. The band that once toured with borrowed instruments after a seizure went on to sell over 25 million records worldwide. Grand Funk Railroad's fight changed how artists approach the business side of music. When a musician insists on having their lawyer review a contract today, they're building on a foundation that bands like Grand Funk established through painful experience. Their struggle reminds us that sometimes the biggest battles in music history happen not on stage, but in courtrooms where the future of art is decided.